Lights were flickering in my house like it was a club. And what was that I was hearing? Could it be music? I stopped walking and ran straight home, only to meet half of the school in my house, drinking, dancing, and partying. What? My crush, Andy, the popular girls, Chloe and her friends who always picked on me, and all the cool and popular high school kids I wanted to be like were partying in my living room. And was that my mom serving drinks? Mom?
Surprise!
Everyone screamed once they noticed my presence. It was not my birthday, so I knew that this was a prank, and my mother had fallen smack in the middle of it. What did this mean? Could Chloe and her friends be punishing me for not submitting their homeworks on time? I was struggling to breathe at this point while everyone stared at me, confused. I started breathing rapidly and deeply, then people began blurring. Oh my god, I was hyperventilating. If this was happening to me, then it meant that it wouldn't be long before... The blurry high schoolers suddenly disappeared and everything went dark.
Oh, honey, are you okay? I'm so sorry.
I looked around. I was in my room. Phew, that meant that it was just a bad dream. Mom, you won't believe the dream I just had. Half of my school kids were partying in our living room, and I fainted. Crazy, right? Mom looked down like she was embarrassed.
Honey, I'm sorry, okay? I was just worried about your social life, and I wanted you to become more outgoing. I wanted these popular kids to think you were cool and invite you to parties.
Wait, what are you saying? You hosted a high school party for me? That was real? It wasn't a dream? They were here?
Yes, but not anymore. I sent them out. Most of them freaked out and left immediately you fainted anyway. I just told the few people left to leave.
How could you do that, Mom? I screamed.
Well, what do you want me to do? You don't socialize. You have no friends. All you ever do is walk around with the same bun hairstyle, the same types of baggy clothes, and your uncool, thick-rimmed glasses.
She paused for a second after seeing the hurt that was written all over my face.
I'm sorry. I just wanted you to have an avenue to communicate with your schoolmates besides tutoring and doing their assignments.
I heard a ping on my phone. It was a link from our school group chat that sent me straight to YouTube. It led me to a viral video with the title, Oh no. I watched the recorded video of myself and fainted again. Monday morning caught up to me and it was time to face my fears. I knew I was in for a lot as I opened our massive high school hallway doors. Everyone stared at me, then the pointing and whispers began.
OMG, it's that nerdy freak from YouTube. So weird.
How can someone faint at a surprise party? Absolutely ridiculous.
Oh my god, the weirdo is coming close to me.
I was about to run out of school and back home due to embarrassment when Chloe suddenly held my hand.
Shut your mouth, freaks. What makes you think you're better? Such dummies.
She helped wipe my tears and walked me to class, leaving the whole school in utter confusion. Lunchtime came and Chloe invited me to her table after buying me lunch. What was happening? I'd rather sit somewhere else, Chloe. If you're trying to make up for constantly picking on me all these years, you've been forgiven. I'll submit you and your friends' homeworks as soon as possible. Chloe and her friends burst into laughter.
Sit down, baby girl. You're one of us now, and in this group, we don't do homework. Don't worry, we'll delegate your previous duty to someone else soon. You don't have to worry about any of that anymore, yours included.
She practically forced me to sit down at their table and we began eating. School closed and Chloe walked me home, leaving me in as much utter confusion as she'd left the rest of the school.
You seem like you're in a good mood today, honey.
I guess you can say that. Today went much better than I expected. Chloe defended me when I was being mocked for the viral video, and she invited me to become part of her group.
Wow, that's more than amazing. I know you coped with their constant maltreatment because you liked and wanted to be like them. I'm happy that you finally achieved your goal, honey.
Wait a minute. You don't have anything to do with this, do you?
I swear.
She choked on the water she was drinking and coughed a little bit.
I promise. I have absolutely nothing to do with any of this, I promise.
It better be that way, because I won't forgive you this time. During the weeks that followed, I and my new group became closer and closer. We studied together, paired up in group works, and had sleepovers and night outs. My new friends influenced my dress sense, and pretty soon, I dropped the baggy clothes and started dressing more elegantly. During one of our sleepovers, Andy posted a cute video on Instagram, and everyone started admiring it. While watching the video, I couldn't help myself as I turned bright red.
Why are you blushing so much?
Huh? Blush? No blush. No blushing. Definitely not blushing.
Oh my gosh. She can't even form a proper sentence anymore. Someone has a crush.
Chloe's saying. Huh? Crush? No crush. No crushing. Definitely not crushing. The girls started giggling. Okay, maybe a little. Just a little. Just small. Just a tiny, weeny bit of a little. Very little crush.
So why didn't you say that before? You could have been in a relationship with him by now. Don't worry, we'll help you with him. Andy will be yours in a very tiny, weeny bit of a little, very little time.
We all burst into laughter.
Let's start with an epic romanticized first date.
My new life was everything I'd ever wanted. Popularity, popular friends, the spotlight, recognition, and pretty soon, my first love, Andy. The girls planned a date, dolled me up, and invited Andy. To my surprise, Andy actually came. He knew he was going on a date with me, and he honored the invitation. Ah! What if he likes me too?
Hey, Kathy.
He said after arriving at the restaurant we chose, looking as stunning as ever. Hey, Andy.
Can you have a seat?
He pulled out a chair for me. Oui, such a gentleman. I sat down and we started discussing. Everything was going good and sweet until...
OMG, Kathy, Andy, I can't believe this. Such a coincidence. I didn't know you guys were here. I just came to eat and surprise. My friends are here too. I guess we all have good taste. Can I join you guys?
Chloe arrived looking even more dolled up than I was. What do you mean you didn't know we were here? You practically booked this. Chloe covered my mouth with her hands to stop me from finishing my sentence, purposely rubbing her hand around my face and spoiling my makeup in the process.
Don't be rude, Kathy. I'm a friend.
Actually, this is a date. It's meant for 2 people, so we'd appreciate it if you just left.
Chloe laughed and sat down.
Don't be rude, Andy. We're friends.
Actually, we don't know each other.
Are you a player?
What?
Do you just want to play my friend? I know that's what you want.
Excuse me?
I heard you're poor. Why do you want to date a fellow poor classmate? You need a rich girlfriend like me. I can take care of you.
Huh?
Guys, I'm just kidding.
She laughed.
I think I should leave now.
Andy stood up and left before I could stop him. I turned to Chloe. What the heck was that?
Forget him. He doesn't deserve you.
Andy avoided me in school as much as possible after the ruined date. I finished classes earlier than usual one day and decided to grab a quick lunch at home before heading to the library. On getting home, I overheard a conversation and saw something that spoiled my whole year. Right in the kitchen was my mother hugging Chloe and giving her cash.
Thank you for being friends with my daughter. I really appreciate it. It's nothing, ma'am. Just give me the money.
OMG! Was my mom really paying Chloe to be my friend? But she promised. I needed a quiet place to cry, so I ran to the diner down the street. I chose the most private corner and bawled. After a few minutes, I heard an angel's voice. He started by clearing his throat.
Kathy, are you all right? You've been crying here for a while. What's the problem?
It was Andy. What are you doing here?
I work here.
Is that why Chloe said you were poor?
I guess.
I really don't care about money. I just really like you. OMG. I realized that I just confessed my feelings, but it was too late already.
I like you too. I actually always have. I just didn't have the boldness to walk up to you. I'm sorry for being such a chicken. We could have started dating a long time ago. I wanted to approach you during or after your party, but you suddenly started hanging out with Chloe, so I couldn't because she's a bad person and I thought you'd become a bad person too. Despite that, I was still happy when you invited me out.
OMG.
So tell me what's wrong.
I told Andy everything and he comforted me.
Date me.
Excuse me?
I'm sorry. I mean, will you be my girlfriend? I'm not very great with this romantic stuff, you see?
I wasn't ready to forgive my mother, so I ignored her. Andy took me to school the next day, and I could see Chloe's facial expression turn from excitement to disappointment to disgust to anger, and then back to fake excitement when she saw us holding hands.
What are you doing with this player busboy?
Chloe walked up to us and asked.
Leave him immediately and follow me,
she commanded. Andy waited for a couple of seconds to see if I'd make a stupid move before holding my hands tighter and walking me straight to class, right past Chloe and her friends.
I think you need new friends.
He smiled and kissed me on my left cheek at the door of the class. We walked in hand, and everyone was in awe. Andy dropped me at home after school and tried to get me to talk to my mom, but I explained that I wasn't ready. He insisted that I give her a chance, and I promised to try.
Why are you suddenly acting up, honey?
My mom confronted me once I stepped into the house. I should be asking you that, Mom. You paid Chloe to be friends with me?
What? Why in the world would I do that?
Don't lie, Mom. I saw you giving her some money.
Oh, that? Chloe said you borrowed some money from her, so I just paid back.
But I didn't borrow anything. I've never borrowed money from her.
So why have I paid her 155 times?
Why didn't you ask me?
I didn't see the point.
God, my mom was so annoying. I walked straight to Chloe's home to confront her.
Broken up with Andy yet?
Why would I do that?
Leave then.
Why have you been stealing from my mom? She turned to me surprised.
Oh, you found out. Now I have no reason to pretend to like you anymore.
Return what you've stolen or I'll have you arrested. I started leaving, but Chloe stopped me.
You think you have it all, huh? Excellent brain, wonderful parents, rich boyfriend? You're a fool.
Rich boyfriend?
Your busboy boyfriend Andy is actually a millionaire, and I wanted him for myself. I really hate you, you know.
Before I could reply, I felt a presence and saw Chloe's mother behind us, looking at Chloe with angry eyes.
You've been stealing again?
Again? All right. I was out of here. As I walked towards Andy's restaurant for our date, I realized that I didn't even mind leaving the money with Chloe. She became my friend so she could steal from my gullible mom, but her friendship gave me a millionaire boyfriend. Quid pro quo. I got out just in time. Half of the farm is on fire. I need to rescue the animals.
Oh no! Grandma, please don't go back in there. It's not safe.
My donkey. I have to go, Leanna. Bye.
My grandma hung up suddenly, and I was scared out of my mind. Somehow her farm had caught on fire, and I was starting to think it was all my fault, even though I lived about 10 miles away. You see, something happened when I went to my grandma's farm a few weeks ago, and terrible things have been happening since. Stick around and I'll tell you how it all happened. About 6 months ago, I was totally bored with my family. I lived with my mom and dad, who were both accountants. Brad, my big brother, and Gina, my little sister. One evening, we were all having dinner, and I tried to express myself. This is a really boring family. How did I end up being born into this family of losers?
Liana, that's no way to talk to me and your mother.
Why don't you accept my constructive criticism and just become a little more exciting? I mean, who has 2 accountants for parents? Why couldn't one of you be a movie star or something? I'm so embarrassed when I have to talk about you guys in class.
Leanna, I'm sick of your foolishness. I'm sending you to your grandma's house for 2 weeks as a punishment.
Mom, no, there's no electricity there.
Well, you're such an exciting person compared to us. I'm sure you'll find cool things to do.
I went up to my room sulking. Why couldn't they, just listen to me and become cooler? No. Instead, I was getting punished. The next day, my dad drove me to my grandma's place. She was so happy to see me, but I just wanted to bury myself in a hole in the backyard.
If it isn't my favorite granddaughter, I'm so grateful I'll get some extra help on the farm now.
Hi, Grandma. I couldn't be angry anymore because my grandma was just too cute. I took my bags and my dad sped off like he was happy to get rid of me. But I didn't care. My grandma had made a cherry pie, so nothing in the world mattered anymore. After getting settled in, my grandma started telling me a story about a magical mushroom elf. She always told me stories like that, so I wasn't shocked or anything. Grandma, where do you get those stories from? Your head? You've got a really vivid imagination.
My head? Everything I tell you is true.
Grandma, I hate to break it to you, but elves don't exist.
Oh, they do. And they can grant you wishes. So, this mushroom is bright pink with blue dots, and only very special people can see them while wandering through the forest. When you see it, if you want to make a wish, you must touch it lightly. Then an elf will appear and grant you 2 wishes.
That's funny.
It's true, child.
Have you ever seen one before?
No, but my grandmother told me she did. Somewhere around this farm. That was many, many years ago. Anyway, it's getting late. Take this lamp to your bedroom and don't forget to turn it off before you go to sleep. Make sure you set the alarm for 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. You have to milk the cows.
Okay, Grandma. I went to my room and fell asleep while trying to read a book. For the first few days, I was bored out of my mind, working on the farm, and eventually I just couldn't take it anymore. I decided to go exploring and, yep, you guessed it, right into the forest. After walking for about 15 minutes, I started feeling really hungry, so I tried to make it back to my grandma's house, but I ended up going in circles for another 20 minutes. I finally realized I was lost. I sat down in some grass and was about to start crying when I noticed something next to me. Could it be? I stared for a while. It was the same pink and blue mushroom from her story. Now, trust me, I didn't believe in magic at all. But there's just something about being lost in a forest that makes you believe in anything. I stroked it, and poof! A little man with huge ears popped out of the mushroom.
Hello, Liana.
What are you? How do you know my name?
Don't objectify me. The correct question is, who are you? My name is Oliver. Oliver the elf. I'm here to grant you 2 wishes. Please hurry up, because I've got other things to do.
I was a bit too shocked to speak.
Well?
My first wish is to get back to my grandma's house.
Granted. Just follow the path of orange flowers.
Suddenly, a little path was created out of nothing. Wow.
What's your second wish?
Maybe you can make my family less boring? Yes, that's my wish, to have a less boring family.
Granted. Now goodbye.
And he disappeared. I ran down the path and reached my grandmother's house. Wow, it really worked, I thought. I decided not to tell Grandma anything, and I just continued doing whatever she asked until it was time to go home. When my time was up, my dad came to pick me up. I hugged my grandma and said goodbye.
How was your time on the farm, darling?
Great. Dad, did anything exciting happen while I was gone?
No.
He continued driving in silence. When we got home, my mom was standing outside, looking worried. My brother was standing next to her, looking like he was about to cry, and my little sister was playing in the grass. Hi, Mom, what's wrong?
We stepped out for a while to go to the supermarket, and when we got back, all of the furniture was missing.
What do you mean the furniture is missing?
My dad asked angrily. We walked inside and it was surreal. All we had left were curtains. Everything was gone.
But how would someone even have time to steal all this stuff? And how did no one else notice and call the police?
I don't know.
Suddenly, my mom's cell phone started ringing.
Yes, boss. Sure. But I can't come in right now. I'm dealing with a family emergency. What do you mean you have something important to tell me? Can you please tell me over the phone? What? Oh my gosh.
My mom hung up and stared at the floor. Mom, what's wrong?
I've just been fired.
What? My dad decided to take us to a restaurant for dinner after we called the police and they made all the reports.
So what now?
Well, I think we'll have to sell our house because we don't have any savings.
But where will we live?
I don't know about you guys, but...
Dad, what do you mean?
Well, I'm sorry to break it to you all like this, but I've been seeing someone. Her name is Nicole, and she's 8 months pregnant with our baby.
You piece of dirt! How could you cheat on me? I thought you loved me. We have a beautiful family together. How could you even think of doing something like this?
I'm sorry, darling. I'm going to move in with her since our baby is coming soon. The rest of you will just have to figure out your own living situation.
My jaw literally dropped. In no time, all our furniture was gone, my mom's job was gone, and now my dad was having an affair? And I was about to have a baby sister or brother? This was not what I meant when I said I wanted a family that wasn't boring. So anyway, my parents had a huge fight in the restaurant, and when we got home, my mom packed our clothes and we went to stay with her sister a few blocks away. We were lucky because she had a few extra rooms, but it was still weird being away from my real home. Things continued to get worse. My brother got kicked off his baseball team because they thought he stole something. Then my sister came home one afternoon crying because no one in her kindergarten class wanted to be her friend anymore. Everyone's life was literally falling apart, and it was all my fault. I had to try to do something to make it right, but what? I sat and thought long and hard. Maybe I needed to go back to the forest to find that stupid elf. Hey, Mom, can I go to Grandma's house this weekend?
Sure, honey.
But just as she agreed, the phone rang and my grandma told me the farm was on fire. After she hung up, I convinced my mom to take us up there immediately to check on her. When we got there, the firemen had already put it out and my grandma was hugging her donkey and smiling.
At least Rex is okay.
I hugged my grandma tightly. Yes, Grandma. Rex the donkey. And you. You matter more. Now, Grandma, can I tell you something? I think this is all my fault.
What do you mean, baby?
Remember that mushroom you told me about? And the elf? I found them in the forest when I was staying here a few weeks ago. I wish that my family would be less boring, but this isn't what I meant.
That's silly, Oliver.
You know him? I thought you said you never...
There's a lot I haven't told you, dear. But sometimes, magic comes into our lives to teach us to be more grateful for what we already have. I might know how to reverse this curse. There's a special type of paper in my drawer inside. Write him a note, then drop it in the forest. You'll know he read it when things begin to change for the better.
None of this made any sense to me. First a mushroom, then an elf, and now some magic paper? But it was worth a shot. I followed my grandma's instructions and ran back to the house. We all left together, including my grandma, because she was still a bit in shock from the fire. We had about 2 weeks of calm when my dad walked into my aunt's house with a bouquet of flowers and an announcement.
So, the baby was born?
What does that have to do with us?
It isn't mine. I came here to apologize for everything. The affair, moving out. I'm so sorry. Please, take me back. I'll never do it again.
Surprisingly, my mom took the flowers, then gave him a hug.
I got a huge deal at work and will be able to keep the house. And I bought lots of new furniture to say sorry. It's not just these flowers.
We moved back home that same day, and although things were a bit awkward and rocky at first, our family improved. Brad was accepted back onto the team, my mom found a new job, and my little sister was able to make friends again. I realized that my boring family was the best in the world, but now I'm really suspicious of my grandma. I think she might be a witch or something.
I grabbed my 5-year-old sister's hand and made a run for it. If we got caught, it'd all be over. We couldn't get sent over the border. We just couldn't. The sound of the dogs barking and the voices and the police officers grew louder with every second. We darted through the crowd until we came to a large drain. I jumped in first, then grabbed my sister and ran. The stench of the drain was nauseating, but we couldn't stop. We ran until everything was quiet in the dark. I sat and held Benita on top of me. When Mom had died, I'd promised her I'd take care of Benita. At this moment, I knew I needed to come up with a plan to protect my sister. This is my true story. However, names have been changed to protect the people involved.
Dev, I'm hungry.
Benny looked up at me. Don't worry, Benny, I'll get us something to eat. We walked along a dirty path. I saw lights ahead and I prayed that they were friends and not foes. A few minutes later, Benny and I stumbled into a refugee village. There were tents and boarded structures close to each other. I asked around for some food, but no one was willing to offer anything until I came to Arjuna and Anya's boarded structure. Anya opened the door and welcomed us into their 2-room home. She quickly made us some sandwiches with something to drink. After we thanked her, Benny and I gobbled them down. We had gone 2 days without eating. Thank you so much. My name is Dav and this is my sister, Benita. We're new here.
My name is Anya.
The door opened and she turned to the person that just came in.
And that's my older brother, Arjuna.
I stood up and shook Arjuna's hand. So what do you guys do for jobs?
There is a company that trains young men to be assistants to billionaires. It's nothing glamorous. We get less than minimum wage, but the income is steady.
How soon can I start training?
You can start tomorrow.
I'd need to get someone to watch Benny.
I'd love to watch her.
Anya offered.
You guys can stay here until you get on your feet. We don't have much, but someone helped us when we first started, so we're paying it forward.
The next day, I cleaned myself up and borrowed a suit from Arjuna. Training lasted 6 weeks where we learned how to answer phone calls, write shorthand, use a computer, practice basic sanitation methods, just to name a few. During those 6 weeks, I wasn't paid, so Benny and I depended on Arjuna's small salary to get by. I did some petty theft and handed the money to Anya to purchase food items. She never questioned where I got the money, and for that I'm grateful because I didn't want to lie to her. After my 6-week training, I was assigned my first billionaire. Over the years, I worked for quite a few billionaires, but they were all the same: mean, ungrateful, and selfish. I was able to put up a wooden structure next to Anya and Arjuna for Benny and I where we lived a very simple life. That was until I met Mr. Cook, who changed everything. During my first few weeks of working for Mr. Cook, who had a wife and 2 teenage daughters, it was a nightmare. I was expected to get to his home at 5 a.m., where I was instructed to iron Mr. Cook's suits and shine his shoes. I was also given domestic chores to complete as well. You'd think that if we were working in the same place, that Mr. Cook would have at least offered me a lift to the office, but that wasn't the case. I was expected to finish all my chores at his home and then travel to work and get there on time. But through it all, I smiled and I was always pleasant. If I had to suffer through a few injustices to give my sister a shot at a better life, then I was all for it. After the first 6 months, Mr. Cook called me to his office.
I must say, Dev, you are the best assistant I've ever had. You're diligent, hardworking, and not once have I heard you speak badly of me or my family.
Thank you, Mr. Cook.
I was just testing you to see if I can trust you with the lifestyle that I live and some secrets that must be kept between a boss and his assistant. Can you do that?
Yes, sir.
Good. I'll be setting up some computer courses and legal document classes so you're better equipped to fill in the gaps at the office when needed. You won't be getting a higher salary, but the experience will be good for you.
I kept my head down, did what I was told, and turned a blind eye to Mr. Cook's illegal affairs and late-night shenanigans with female workers. As the obedient assistant, I'd always call Mrs. Cook and let her know that her husband was in a meeting and he'd be home late. One afternoon, while Mr. Cook was out of the office, Mrs. Cook arrived. Good afternoon, Mrs. Cook. Mr. Cook is not in right now. Do you want to leave a message?
What I want is to see my husband.
You can wait in the waiting room until he comes, ma'am. Mrs. Cook laughed.
Do you really think I'm going to wait in the waiting room like a concubine?
Mrs. Cook walked to the door and tried to open it.
If you don't open this door right now, I'll make sure you never work in this town again, and you get deported to whatever godforsaken land you came from.
I opened the door quickly and Mrs. Cook entered and slammed the door behind her. I sat there nervously as I had strict instructions not to let anyone into Mr. Cook's office without his consent. As soon as I saw Mr. Cook walking towards his office, I walked hastily to greet him. Mr. Cook, I'm so sorry, I couldn't stop her.
Boy, stop babbling. Spit it out. Couldn't stop who?
Mrs. Cook, she's in your office, sir. Mr. Cook stopped and looked at me disapprovingly, but he didn't say anything.
Knock on the door in 5 minutes and say my next client is here.
I nodded and he inhaled deeply before he entered the office. For the next 5 minutes, I sat and listened to angry, muffled voices coming from inside Mr. Cook's office. As soon as the 5 minutes was up, I knocked on the door and opened it slightly. Excuse me, Mr. Cook, your next client is here.
Thank you, Dev. Margaret, we'll finish discussing this at home.
Mrs. Cook pushed past me and exited the office. Mr. Cook sat behind his desk and loosened his tie.
Pour me a scotch.
Yes, sir. After pouring the drink, I handed it to Mr. Cook, who drank it in one shot.
Okay, bring in the Phillip files. We have to get...
Mr. Cook's eyes widened as he held his chest. Mr. Cook, are you okay? Mr. Cook couldn't answer as he gasped for words. Somebody help! A few staff members gathered into the office and laid Mr. Cook on the floor and started CPR. But it was too late. Mr. Cook was dead. Staff members waited outside Mr. Cook's office for the police to arrive. I was taken to the police station and questioned. That's when I saw Mrs. Cook as she sat by another table with an officer as she gave her statement. I wasn't released until midnight, and I arrived to collect Benita around 1 a.m. I'm sorry I got here so late.
It's okay, Dev. We saw the news. Leave Benita to sleep. She'll be okay.
Anya smiled. I looked over at Arjuna. What's going to happen now? I've never had a billionaire die on me before. I ran my hands through my hair frustratedly.
I'm sure the company will line up another job for you soon.
I sure hope so, for Benita's sake. Over the next few days, I waited for a phone call from the company, but none came. I wondered if Mrs. Cook made good on her promise to ensure that I'd never work in this town again. On the news, it was stated that Mr. Cook had died of a heart attack, so I was no longer a suspect in Mr. Cook's death. Even though this was the case, the company never called to assign me a new job. I returned to the streets and pickpocketed people to ensure I was able to take care of Benita. One afternoon, while out in the streets, I got a phone call from Mr. Cook's lawyer. He wanted me to be at Mr. Cook's reading of the will. Arjuna, do you think I should go?
If you're invited, it means he left you something. Either way, it won't hurt to go and see what's up.
On the day of the reading of the will, I walked into Mr. Hudson's office waiting area. Mrs. Cook and her 2 daughters were there. A few seconds later, Mr. Finland entered.
Thank you all for coming.
What is he doing here?
Mrs. Cook scoffed.
He's here because he was invited. Shall we go to my office and begin?
He has no right to be here. What could Stan possibly have left for this low-life assistant?
Mrs. Cook raved on and on that I was just the help and I needed to go home and attend to my own affairs. I stood up and turned to Mr. Finland. I think I'd better leave. I don't belong here.
Dev, you stay right there. I'll read the necessary parts to Mrs. Cook and her daughters, then I'll come and get you, okay?
I nodded and Mr. Finland ushered Mrs. Cook and her daughters into the office. Approximately 30 minutes later, Mrs. Cook rushed into the waiting area and began to accuse me of swindling her husband. I don't know what you're talking about. Mrs. Cook stepped up and slapped me.
Security, get her and her daughters out of here now!
yelled a voice from the door of the waiting area. After they were escorted from the building, Mr. Finland apologized to me. He also asked if I'd like to press charges against Mrs. Cook, but I told him I just wanted to get it over and done with, so he ushered me into his office. As I sat in the office and Mr. Finland read the will, tears came to my eyes. Mr. Cook had left me $10 billion. You're not joking, are you? Mr. Finland laughed.
Oh no, this is all legit. I guess you really made a mark on him. We also found documents where Mr. Cook was putting things into place so you'd have citizenship, and I'd like to finish the proceedings.
I nodded and gave Mr. Hudson all the information he needed so that I could receive the inheritance and the information needed to get citizenship. I have some friends. Can you help them with their citizenship as well?
Sure.
Mr. Hudson handed me his card.
Have them call me tomorrow so I can send all the paperwork in at the same time.
Over the next few weeks, Mr. Hudson helped us set up ID cards, bank accounts, birth papers, and citizenships. As soon as I received the inheritance, I gave Arjuna and Anya $1 billion. We purchased homes next to each other in suburban neighborhoods. We didn't want anything flashy to bring attention to ourselves. We were now able to enjoy our lives on our own terms. My story seemed to be a lucky one. Or was it? I have a confession to make. I was a computer hacker in my country. However, I knew I had to play possum if I wanted my plan to work. The goal was to get Mr. Cook to trust me, and once that goal was complete, I had everything else in the bag. Once trust was enabled, I had access to everything Mr. Cook had access to. Things such as his medication, legal documents, and of course, a computer. With his heart condition, it was easy to switch his medication to one that would induce a heart attack, and with his constant use of alcohol, it sped up the process. Next, I gained access to Mr. Cook's will and made adjustments where necessary. It was easy to get Mr. Cook to sign his will since he signed documents without reading, because, yep, he trusted me. I also left citizenship documents in Mr. Cook's office drawer. After all, what harm could a refugee boy do to a billionaire? Mr. Cook was just like the others. He had everything going for him, but he chose to be arrogant and selfish. I was able to fulfill my promise to my parents, and now Benita and I have a life that we deserve. You can lose sleep over what happened to Mr. Cook, but I can assure you that I don't. Can assure you that I don't. Can assure you that I don't. Can assure you that I don't.